Hi, boys and girls. This is Grandma Sheila again with another story for you. Our story today is called The Day the Sheep Came Through. Well, the family was all in the kitchen, and Dad was saying, "Hey, it's spring. It's almost time for the sheep to come through, and I think it's going to happen any day now." And he looked at Jenny and he said, "Aren't you excited?" But Jenny wasn't excited about anything right now. The main reason was she had not been excited about anything for probably 6 weeks. And that was the fateful day that Lauren French had come to their school as a student and was in Jenny's classroom. Oh, Jenny thought. Well, then her brother, he spoke up and he said, "Aw, don't worry about her. There's something wrong with her now. She won't even play catch with me anymore." And Mama looked at Jenny. And Jenny, she put her head down. She had told Mama about her problem. Well, what had happened was when Jenny had started to school, she had to come down the same road that Jenny did. And Laura French, it was like almost from the very first, she started using her tongue to humiliate Jenny. She would meet her on the bridge every day going to school, and she would say awful things. Jenny just couldn't figure it out. Well, then today, her brother had said that, and she knew that it wasn't right for her to feel like this, but she didn't know what to do. Well, after breakfast, Mom was combing and braiding her hair, and Mom said, "Jenny, have you ever thought that maybe when she first came, there was something that you did that made her upset?" Jenny said, "Mom, I've thought and I've thought and I've tried and I've tried. I've tried to be nice to her, and she just gets worse and worse. I don't know what to do." And Mom said, "Jenny, you remember that you always have a friend in Jesus, no matter what's going on. I'm sorry it's so hard for you, but you know, the Bible says that what you should do is forgive people. Maybe, just maybe, if you followed the golden rule, it would be easier." Jenny, she didn't want to even go to school. And then her brother called out and said, "Hurry up, Jenny, we're going to be late. Come on." She couldn't just skip school, so she grabbed her books and she started on her way. And ahead of her was the bridge that went over the river. And then she saw her. There was Laura walking down the road, and she scooted up close to Jenny and she looked at her. Now, Laura, she had beautiful blonde hair, and she was the prettiest girl in their class. She was like a year and a half older than the rest of the kids. She couldn't go out and play the strenuous games, and she was always complaining of headaches and things, and so she was often home sick. But Jenny didn't know, what had caused all that. But Laura, when they got to the bridge, she turned around and she looked at Jenny and she said, "You're just an old country girl with all those freckles across your nose, and you have long, skinny legs." Well, Jenny didn't say anything, and Laura said, "Well, can't you even defend yourself?" But what was Jenny to say? She did have freckles on her face. She did live in the country. She did have long, skinny legs, and she was taller than the other girls. What could she do about it? so she didn't say anything. Well, Laura, she said, what do you think you're going to learn at school today? Nothing, I bet. Well, they finally arrived at school, and Jenny quickly went to her seat. And Miss Woolworth, the teacher, she started teaching their geography class. And Jenny, she stared out the window, and her mind was going 100 places other than in geography. And all of a sudden, she heard Miss Woolworth talking. She said, Jenny, why are you daydreaming? I just asked you a question. What country is Calcutta in? And Jenny, her mind was going round and round. Of course she knew what town Calcutta was, but not right now. It was totally gone. And she went, Russia? And all the kids burst out laughing. Well, ever since Laura had come to the school, she was popular, and all the kids liked her. So they kind of shunned Jenny. Jenny was just sick, so she tried to concentrate on the teacher. Now it was math time, and this was an advantage because Jenny was one of the best students in the class in math. And Miss Woolworth was saying to Jenny, come up here and do this division of fractions on the blackboard. None of the rest of the class seemed to understand but you. And Jenny thought, well, that's a good thing. So she went up to the board and she started writing what the teacher told her on the board. And she was figuring it out and everything was great. But then recess time came. And you know, one of the mean things that Laura had called Jenny was because of her long legs. She called her a kangaroo. Those things were all hurtful. Well, she went out to play, and all the kids were pointing at her and they were laughing hysterically. And Jenny couldn't figure it out. And then she realized they were looking at the back of her white blouse. And she looked down. She didn't know how it had happened, but somehow Laura had written kangaroo in big black letters all the way across the back of her white blouse. And the kids, they teased her and teased her and teased her. Finally, she ran back into the school. She went into the library and she got behind those big racks of books and she cried her little heart out. She didn't know what to do about her blouse. There wasn't time for her to go home. So, since she was hidden behind all those book racks, she quickly took off her blouse and turned it inside out. Now, it didn't cover all that writing, but she thought it was at least a little better. The shirt looked weird, but she went back to class. She was so upset that she couldn't think about anything. Today was a day that school was going to be let out early. And Jenny, she got madder and madder and madder inside her heart. And before she knew it, she realized that she let the devil come into her heart. And she was thinking awful things. She said to herself, I'm going to get a big stick and I'm going to beat her up. I'm going to pull out all that blonde hair. Those were horrible things to think about anybody. She would be worse than Laura had been. But it was like she couldn't. She couldn't stop those thoughts. She had let the devil come in. Well, when school was dismissed, she ran outside, and over by the playground, laying on the ground, was a long, big, thick stick. She snatched it up. She said, I'm gonna get her on the way home. As she started to run through their little town, She noticed the store shopkeepers oftentimes put things outside on the sidewalk in front of their stores. The grocer would put out big boxes of fruit and things, and they would sit there in the shade of the roof of the store to tantalize people to buy them. And she noticed that they were putting all the stuff inside the store. And as she was running to try to catch up with Laura, one of the older boys came by her and he said, "Now, you're not going to find Laura. She wasn't feeling good. She went home early." Jenny was looking around, had seen that all those people from the store were putting their stuff away. And she said to herself, maybe the sheep are going to come soon. And then behind her, one of the storekeepers called out, "Little girl, get out of the street. Get out of the street. The sheep are coming." But Jenny was so mad at Laura that she just kept running. And as she was running, a thought came into her mind. Laura couldn't run. She couldn't play hard. Laura couldn't get out of the way of the sheep. Laura was weak and sickly. Oh no! And if they were already coming, oh, they could kill Laura. Jenny, she dropped that stick, started praying. "Oh, dear God, forgive me for thinking those awful things of Laura. Please don't let the sheep kill her." And she started to run even faster. Finally, she got to the bridge and she looked. She could see that huge herd of sheep approaching the end of the bridge. And there, curled up in a ball, in the middle of the bridge, was Laura. She was laying against the railing. Then Jenny, she thought of something. She remembered one of the first days that Laura had come to school, that Jenny wanted to impress her. And when they'd gotten to the bridge, she jumped up on the rail. The rail of the bridge was about as high as Jenny's shoulder. And she had jumped up on top of there. She was really athletic. And she had run down the top of the rail, trying to show Laura that she wasn't afraid and how strong she was. Then she thought, I wonder if that's what upset Laura. But Jenny didn't have time to think about it. She ran as hard as she could to where Laura lay in a ball, and she started yelling at the top of her lungs, "Laura, get up on the rail! Get up on the rail!" But Laura just stayed there. It was like she was so afraid that her body wouldn't work. Well, Jenny got to her, and she kept telling her, "You've got to get up." She grabbed Laura's arms, and she pulled her up to a standing position, and she put her hands up on top of the metal cables that came down off the top of the bridge. And she got underneath Laura, and she started pushing her up till she had her up on the rail. By this time, the sheep were starting to come, and Jenny, she jumped up on top of the rail. She grabbed Laura. She put her against those cables that went up, and she took her arms. She put them all the way around Laura so Laura couldn't fall. And the sheep, with the dogs barking behind them, started running across the bridge. Laura wasn't looking. She had her eyes closed. And Jenny, she looked down and she saw the big rams with their big horns sticking out. And she thought, if Laura had been standing in the middle of the bridge, They might have wanted to protect their girl sheep, and they could have pushed her right off the bridge or killed her with their horns. And then she looked at some of the big mother sheep, and she thought they could have trampled her. I'm so glad I got here in time. Oh, God, forgive me for thinking all those awful things. Then she said to Laura, look at the sheep. This is the closest you'll ever be to them. Look at the sheep. But Laura kept her eyes closed. And then she ever so carefully opened her eyes, and she started to peek, but she was still shaking. She was so afraid. Then Laura said she noticed that Laura was looking behind her, down at the deep water of the river. It was extra full because of the spring runoff. And Jenny said, don't look at the deep, dark water. Look at the sheep. And then Jenny thought of something. She was not afraid of that deep, dark water, but she realized that when she let the devil come in, that was worse than deep, dark water. It was more dangerous. What if she'd hurt Laura? She hadn't held on to Jesus. But Laura was safe. Jenny was so thankful. Laura looked up at Jenny. She said, oh, Jenny, you know that you jumped up on this rail? I was so jealous of you. Jenny, I was sick for 2 years. I couldn't run. I couldn't play. I got behind in school. That's why I'm older than all the kids. Jenny, I was jealous of you. I'm so sorry. Oh, Jenny. And Jenny said, it's okay, Laura. Just look at the sheep. But Jenny said, no, it's not okay. I was mean to you. Please, can you forgive me? Oh, please. Can we be friends? And Jenny said, yes, Laura, we can be friends. And Jenny was ever so glad. And do you know, boys and girls, there's 2 voices that you hear. There was the good voice of Jesus telling you to do good things. And there's the bad voice of the devil, like talk to Jenny, telling her to hurt Laura. Don't listen to that bad voice. Just listen to the little voice, the quiet voice of Jesus. Thank you, boys and girls, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.